We grade the Baltimore Ravens 2024 draft, getting into who they picked, what the picks mean for the team, and so much more coming up next year on this bonus episode of Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Ostreicher of Ravens Wire, coming to you from the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much for being here and making Locked On Ravens your first listen each and every day. We're free and available on all podcasting platforms, and includes in video form on YouTube, where you can like the video and subscribe to the channel, also in audio form, where you can follow along there as well and subscribe over there 5 days a week, plus more of Ravens coverage. So news, analysis, updates. We go live for big pieces of Ravens news. We had 3 live shows over the course of the last 3 days. Also, we go live after every single Ravens game, so that'll start up again in a couple of months. Today's episode of Locked On Ravens is brought to you by LinkedIn. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. We are back. The 2024 draft officially in the books. It's crazy to think we did all that prep, all those mock draft Mondays. We were really going at it. And now we know. We know the official Ravens draft board. 9 picks, no trade ups, no trade backs. They stuck and picked at every single spot. So today we're going to be diving into, on this bonus episode, wanted to hop in here and just do a little overview, an overall overview. And by that, I mean we're going to be grading the Ravens 2024 draft here today, getting into the picks in particular, diving into a little bit of background on each, and then looking at positional value, player value. So there's a lot that goes into this. So we'll do day 1 and day 2 in the first part of the show. We'll split it up. So we'll do that in the first part. Then in the second part, we'll dive into all of day 3, and also talk a little bit about what Baltimore could have done differently throughout the draft. I think there were a couple of decisions that people weren't necessarily super happy with. And then we'll get into an AFC North draft update, talk about what the 3 of the Ravens division rivals did, and whether they stacked up with the Ravens draft class. So a lot to dive into on this bonus episode. Really appreciate everybody taking some time. If you're listening to this when it comes out, the day of, taking time out of your Sunday, or if we're listening maybe on a different day, thank you for tuning in. Really do appreciate it. So let's first dive into the first pick the Ravens made, number 30 overall, cornerback Nate Wiggins, a player that fits the mold of how you defend in today's NFL in terms of what do offenses love. And we're going to talk about this in the second segment with Baltimore's day 3 wide receiver, excuse me. But what does the NFL love? The NFL loves speed. Eric DeCosta said, go build that track team. You'd love to build a track team. Well, on defense, you got to have guys that can match those track teams, and the Ravens certainly get that in Nate Wiggins, 4'2", 840, one of the best cover corners, if not the best cover corner in this draft class. You know, there were arguments about Terrion Arnold and Kenyon Mitchell, Cooper DeJean, but Nate Wiggins, it seemed like the Ravens really were laser focused on him and had their eye on him. Now, personally, I mean, look, I would have preferred a Terrion Arnold. I probably would have picked Kenyon Mitchell above him too. But to me, if you're talking about DeJean versus Wiggins, I'm okay with them taking Wiggins here because I feel like he fits the mold of what Baltimore likes. He's 6'1", measured into the combine at about 173 pounds, but he more so is in the range of 180, 182. I think he slimmed down for the combine, which is just something to keep in mind there. But he does have a little bit of a slender frame. So I think an NFL offseason after this first year will do him a lot of good in just being in an NFL strength program in general. I think I've seen the Marcus Peters comparisons. He plays with a swagger to him, plays with a chip on his shoulder during his whole introductory press conference for Baltimore a couple of days ago. He's just talking about how, wants to prove everybody wrong. So he has that Ravens mentality. To me, I think that you need players like this, and the Ravens love 3 cornerback rotations. I know there was a lot of conversation about, why aren't you taking an offensive lineman here? Why aren't you taking a wide receiver here? But for me, this was a BPA pick for the Ravens that also filled the need. Marlon Humphrey, Brandon Stevens, Nate Wiggins, that's a really good 3 on the outside. And then John Harbaugh even talked about this a little bit too, the positional versatility that all these guys can have. Marlon Humphrey kicking inside of the slot. Obviously, Brandon Stevens has safety experience. Wiggins can play both in the slot and on the outside. Plus, maybe if you want to throw him in some safety looks, you can do that as well. The Ravens love versatility. The NFL is moving to more of a positionless defense league, and the Ravens certainly embody a lot of that. So to me, I give this Wiggins pick an A. I think that, again, there's a lot of conversation about the actual position. There were no offensive linemen worthy of 30 once Tyler Guyton went off the board. The Ravens had to work with that. And again, they said they were targeting Nate Wiggins the whole time. So it worked out for him because their guy was still on the board. But even if there was an offensive lineman there, then there would have been a bit of a different conversation. If a Guyton was still there, it would have been a bit of a different conversation, but he wasn't. So at that point, if I'm Baltimore, I'm not reaching for a guy with a second round grade in the first round. I mean, I want to make sure that I'm taking a guy on my board that I'm high on, and Baltimore certainly did that. So I'll give them an A. I think the Wiggins pick has a ton of potential to pan out, and there's some uncertainty in that Baltimore cornerback room for the next couple of seasons. Brandon Stevens not signed to an extension currently. Marlon Humphrey, that contract is going to have a lot of conversation about it. So I liked the Wiggins pick a lot. Then you move to the second round. Roger Rosengarten from Washington, the offensive tackle, was the pick. Now, Kingsley Suamataia or Roger Rosengarten were the two guys that the Ravens were probably picking between, but just like Wiggins, apparently they said that they had their eye on Rosengarten the whole time. Rosengarten is a super athlete, ran a sub 5 40-yard dash as a 308-pound offensive lineman, which is pretty impressive considering that. Now, he's a little bit lighter, as a lot of people have said, and I've kind of adopted the phrase as my own. Doesn't have a lot of sand in the pants when it comes to the anchor. The anchor is not consistently strong. You'd like to see it be stronger. So when it comes to some of these power rushers or speed to power rushers, sometimes he can get overmatched a little bit. Now, I think his hand placement is good as a whole. Can play with some better pad level. I think that's an adjustment that can be made, though, so I'm not necessarily worried about that. Rosengarten, again, the super athlete part is the thing that intrigues me, especially when it comes to what Baltimore's looking for in their new offensive line, right? They lose 3 starters. They have a chance to revamp their line in the way that a Todd Monken offense wants. I think Monken wants athletes on his offensive line, and Rosengarten certainly that. Really good at getting to the second level. He's able to engage on the first level, get off of that block and win that block and immediately push up to the second level. He can pull really well. We know the Ravens love pulling guys out into space and working with that. So I think he fits what the Ravens want to do. I would have probably taken Kingsley by a hair here. I just think that he was the better prospect. But, and of course, he goes to the Chiefs, right? The Chiefs had a heck of a draft, by the way. For Ravens, that's unfortunate. But I think that Rosengarten was a fine pick, and probably, again, the second guy I would have taken, not named Kingsley. So I'll give this one an A-. Again, I think just because Kingsley would have been the pick for me, and I am a little worried about the anchor thing, but I think that can, again, if he adds a little bit to him, that can be less of an issue. He also has a lot of positional versatility, has left tackle experience. So if the Ravens find someone they really like at right tackle in 2025 and Ronnie Stanley leaves after this season, there's not this whole hoopla of he has to relearn everything, right? He can go over there and he can play at a pretty seamless transition. But I think he's the leader in the clubhouse, in my opinion, for the starting right tackle job this year. Of course, he'll compete with Daniel Faalele there. Now, Adisa Isaac was the Ravens' third-round pick at number 93, the edge rusher from Penn State. Now, you talk about position. I kind of talked about this a little bit with Nate Wiggins. Corner was a much bigger need to me than edge. I think once Kyle Van Noy came back, that pushed edge down the list. Now, in terms of player value, Adisa Isaac, the Ravens getting him at 93 was incredible. Incredible value for Baltimore. This was a BPA pick. Because when you talk about Adisa Isaac, you look at where he slots in on Baltimore's depth chart right now, I'd probably put him fourth. And that's behind Van Noy, Odafe Oweh, and David Ojabo. Now, I'm sure there's going to be some conversation and controversy about whether you'd put Isaac above Ojabo just because of Ojabo's injury history. But I do think that I'd put Ojabo over Isaac right now. Isaac is somebody that does have a lot of room to grow, but can provide you with some great win rate. His win rate was great in college. And then you also look at what he can bring you. He has the bull rush. He has a couple other traits that are really developed, but the ceiling is so high for him. Plus, he already had production, 7.5 sacks last year at Penn State. That to me is, all right, that's a solid start, but I would have maybe taken another offensive lineman there. I would have maybe taken a wide receiver there. Again, I don't hate the pick. I think it's actually a good pick, but I'm just talking about positionally. Player-wise, I like it. Positional wise, I might have gone somewhere else. So I think I gave it like a B- on my instant reaction to it. I've bumped that up to like more of a B+ because I'm not going to knock the player but the position thing is where it kind of goes. And I'm not saying Baltimore wouldn't have taken an edge at all in this draft. And when the value was there, the value was there. The Ravens will take BPA even if the need isn't the greatest. We've seen that, and I'm not questioning their process there. But we know the offensive line is a big need for them. And while a couple guys went off the board right before Baltimore picked, I think Dominic Puni was someone they could have targeted as well. I think for Isaac, you get good value. So that's why I'm bumping my grade up to a BB plus instead of a B minus B, because the value, I mean, he was a second rounder for pretty much everybody. I think it was in the late 40s, early 50s consensus. Baltimore gets him at 93. So you take that 10 times out of 10. I just don't think his role is going to be super massive in year one. And I think on day one and day two, especially where Baltimore is right now, maybe I would have liked somebody else who came in there and would have had a bigger role, who could fill in a bigger role. But look, you're talking about the draft not just being a this upcoming year thing, it's for the future. And that's how the Ravens have been consistently successful. So I'm not blaming their process and taking a BPA guy 40, 50, 60 picks after they were supposed to go consensus. So I think Baltimore did a really good job on day one and day two. Again, there was maybe they left something on the table there with Kingsley. Maybe they left something on the table there in round 3 with Isaac compared to other positions. But overall, I think a very solid first and second day for Eric DeCosta and company for the Baltimore Ravens. Coming up, though, we'll dive into day 3, grading those picks, and then we'll do, obviously, a whole grade as well. Stay tuned. Plenty to talk about here on Locked On Ravens. First, this show is brought to you by LinkedIn. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. And for me, I've had a ton of great experiences over on LinkedIn, whether it's finding jobs, connecting with people, networking. LinkedIn makes it so easy to do all of that. Plus, LinkedIn isn't just a job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else. Even those who aren't actively searching for a new job might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. Hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. And LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats and might not have had time or resources to hire. So they're consistently finding ways to make the process easier. They even just launched a feature that helps you write job descriptions, making the process even easier and quicker. 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring. Push job for free on LinkedIn.com/LockedOnNFL. Let's LinkedIn.com/LockedOnNFL to push job for free. Terms and conditions apply.
This episode of your favorite Locked On podcast is brought to you by the best meal kit service in the game, Home Chef. No more having to answer the dreaded question, what are we going to do for dinner tonight? Thanks to Home Chef and their chef-designed recipes that are delivered directly to my door, all pre-packaged, pre-portioned. They even peel the garlic cloves for you. And each recipe, one of my favorites, blackened mahi, comes with a full page of easy-to-read instructions that include customization options and pictures to guide you along the way through the step-by-step process so you don't have to ask, is that what chard looks like? I cannot recommend Home Chef enough, especially right now, because for a limited time, Home Chef is giving Locked On listeners 18 free meals, free dessert for life, and of course, free shipping on your first box if you head to homechef.com/lockedon today. That's homechef.com/lockedon for 18 free meals and free dessert for life. Yes, you heard that right. Homechef.com/lockedon. Must be an active subscriber to receive free dessert.
We're back. Our second segment of Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher still talking with you here on this Sunday. Really appreciate everybody tuning in, making Locked On Ravens your first listen each and every day. Thank you so much for subscribing. If you have done that already, if you haven't, highly recommend you do so. Just a personal recommendation from me. Video form, audio form. Really appreciate all the communities we built up as well. Video form, audio form there, to even social media and subtext. I mean, it's been incredible. It was a long draft weekend for sure, but it's officially over at this point. Well, the draft is, but obviously we're still doing some takeaways. We're grading the Ravens draft right now. So let's dive into day 3. The Ravens had 6 picks on day 3. And again, they stuck and picked at every single one. Now, the first one, Devontae Walker out of North Carolina. This is a player that was in that group of early 4th round wide receivers that weren't taken on day 2 that I thought were targets for the Ravens. Javon Baker was in that conversation, a few others as well. Tez Walker's a speedster, though. And I think he can take over some of those deep shots that maybe you would send Rashad Bateman on. Maybe you would send Zay Flowers on. Tez Walker, that is his specialty. And I think that's a really big role for him in year one. I think Baltimore will have some packages for him. He can contribute. Now, Baltimore's wide receiver room right now is Zay Flowers, Rashad Bateman, Tez Walker, Nelson Aguilar, Tyler Wallace, Deontay Hardy. Doesn't necessarily blow you away or anything, but hopefully there is some room for Tez Walker to contribute. He is a bigger bodied player too, can come down with a contested catch, which is something we were talking about for a really long time, is sort of the skill set that I wanted and that many other people wanted and felt was going to be the best for this Ravens team. So Tez Walker, actually, Nate Wiggins, who, again, the Ravens' first-round pick, Tez Walker beat him deep. That was the only 20-yard completion he gave up all year, Nate Wiggins. So he's a very talented player. I think it was good value. I had him as like a mid to late third rounder, so not anything super crazy. But, I mean, I'll give this one a B+. I think there were a couple other receivers I would have had ahead of him in the fourth round, but I don't think Baltimore wanted to trade up. I personally, and we'll talk about this a little bit later in the segment, but I personally would have tried to move some of those 200s picks. I think again, how much value could you have gotten? How many spots could you have moved up? But we'll get to that a little later. I'll call that a B+ pick on Tez Walker. I thought that was a really great one, but the even better one, I think Derek DeCosta went up to himself with TJ Tampa, number 130 out of Iowa State, a cornerback, double dipping at cornerback here. Again, people were wondering because they do already have a decent amount of corner depth on their roster right now, but TJ Tampa is too good of a player to pass up. When you talk about he was consensus, second round pick for so many people, maybe early third. But he's a player that fell due to probably poor testing numbers. The 40 was not great for him. And where have we heard that before? The Ravens taking a swing on poor testers that end up doing really well for him. TJ Tampa is somebody who has physicality, sticky in coverage. Him and Nate Wiggins are a very dynamic cornerback draft duo that they had here. This is an A+, whatever the highest grade is. I'm giving it to the Ravens on that. You get best player available. It still fills a need. Wasn't nearly as big, obviously, once Nate Wiggins goes to you if you're the Ravens. But once you have a guy like that and you're in the fourth round, the end of the fourth round, that's a pick you do 10 times out of 10. Baltimore's just so good at scooping up these guys that just somehow fall, don't find homes. And it's not like they get every single guy, but for a player like TJ Tampa, the potential is absolutely there. And actually, another Nate Wiggins story is that Nate Wiggins and TJ Tampa actually roomed together at the combine. So Nate Wiggins is everywhere with these new Ravens rookie teammates he has. So that's another funny story there. But Tampa is a great pick for Baltimore. Then we get into Rasheen Ali from Marshall, the running back. There were a few running backs who would have probably taken over Rasheen Ali. Kamani Vidal, someone we talked about a ton out of Troy on this show for our mock draft Mondays. But to me, I feel like this is still a solid overall pick. There are some similarities between him and Keaton Mitchell, and this is an easy transition for the Ravens to make once Keaton Mitchell comes back. You can easily make Rasheen Ali active on game day when Keaton's recovering still, and then once Keaton comes back, you can slot Rasheen Ali into that game day inactive role. Keaton comes back and takes back his role. It's going to be a seamless transition. I think that for one of the big things I like about Rasheen Ali is that he can really run good routes out of the backfield. And he has that speed, that breakaway ability. He's dynamic. So, again, a few other running backs, I'll give this one a B, right? I think it's a player that not a lot of people had on their radars. But when you talk about what they needed and what they were looking for at that position, sure, I think Jalen Ray would have been awesome. Some of these other guys as well. But I don't know. I feel like I am more than content with Rasheen Ali here. So, again, not the craziest pick in the world, but I'll give it a B. Then we get into the controversial pick here, and that is Mr. Devin Leary, the quarterback. Now, if you were here with us on Locked On Ravens and you were following along with me during the draft process, you know that backup quarterback was a position that I was all in on in the later rounds of this draft. Now, the issue with this pick for me is I just feel like they could have done something like this in undrafted free agency. Once Joe Milton went off the board to the Patriots get both Drake May and Joe Milton. But once Joe Milton goes off the board, that was the last guy, personally, I was considering for the Ravens at quarterback. I just feel like they could have taken another offensive lineman here, which, again, they did with the next pick, and we'll talk about that. But I just feel like you could have signed an undrafted quarterback, and the Ravens during their post-draft press conference were talking about how he's not even going to compete for the backup job. He's going to be the number 3 guy. This was number 218. I still can't remember off the top of my head where Christian Mahogany went from Boston College, but this is what I'm saying. Maybe you trade 218 and 228 and move up for a guy like Mahogany, or you try to move up for a guy like Milton, try to move up into the like 190s and get a guy like Milton there. So this one is getting a D from me personally. I didn't like it. It's nothing against Evan Leary as a player. I mean, his tape didn't necessarily impress me, but I think the positional value, again, backup quarterback, I get it. But after Joe Milton, there was no one I would have taken with that pick. I would have just tried to get someone in undrafted free agency. So I'm giving this pick a D from me. Next, we have Nick Zamek from Michigan State, the center. Someone who, to me, it's a fine pick. I mean, he's a backup center. The Ravens needed a backup center, needed just some interior depth. You don't want to have Patrick McCary slotted in as your backup center. I'd rather him be the super 6 guy to where you don't have to peg him in to one position. You can just have him kind of free flowing along the offensive line. So I'm sure this is going to be a game day inactive type of pick. He's someone that, I don't know. I feel like it's an okay pick. I'll give it like a C. Didn't necessarily blow me away. There was better value on the board, in my opinion. Bo Limmer went a couple picks before I think 218 happened. That would have probably been my backup center option from Arkansas. But again, I'll give it a C. I mean, it's fine. Nothing that necessarily blows me away. And then Sanusi Kane, the safety from Purdue at pick number 250. Someone who can get up, great in run support, physical player, but coverage skills are an issue for him. I mean, I'm going to give this one another C. It's just kind of a meh pick to me. The Ravens actually signed Bo Braden, undrafted free agency from Maryland, so I'm honestly a little bit – I mean, I think both guys can contribute, but I think that maybe Bo Braid at this point is the one that I would have probably taken in the 7th round and then maybe signed Cade as a free agent. But Cade is still a talented player. I'm not going to sell him short. I'm not trying to disrespect Cade here, but I think that if you want to go young at the safety position, both guys could make the roster, but they didn't have anybody outside of Kyle Hamilton and Marcus Williams, so they needed that depth overall. So from a whole perspective, I can't necessarily tally up all the grades right now live as I'm doing it, but I'll give the Ravens a solid B+. I'm going to weigh the picks earlier a little heavier than I am the picks later down. I'm going to weigh Nate Wiggins higher than I'm going to weigh, a Devin Leary, right? I'm going to weigh the first round pick, all that. And I think the Ravens aced, for the most part, their top 5 picks. The top 5 picks for the Ravens, incredible. So I'm going to give them a B+. I think that it was a really solid draft for the Ravens. Later, it kind of slipped up a little bit in some situations, some circumstances, but I'll say a successful draft weekend for the Ravens. Coming up, we'll take a look, though, what Baltimore could have done differently. Also looking at an AFC North draft update. Stay tuned for that. We got a lot to get to here on Locked On Ravens. First, the show is brought to you by Monopoly Go. And for me, I've been told I'm a competitive person, and that is true. I do have a competitive side. We all do. My competitive side is a big fan of Monopoly Go. I'm sure you've heard of it. It's been downloaded over 150 million times. It's a great twist on Monopoly where you play on not one, but hundreds of Monopoly boards in crazy locations, building up amazing cities that bring you big money. But the best part is messing with my friends. I can charge them rent on my iconic properties, just like classic Monopoly. But I can also heist their vaults of riches for myself. And the leaderboard show me who the biggest Monopoly tycoon is. But it's not just my competitive side that loves it. You can team up with friends and people all around the world in time tournaments to earn huge rewards. So get in on the game and join your friends. Download Monopoly Go now, free on the App Store or Google Play. We're back here, our final segment of Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher still here with you on this Sunday. Really appreciate everybody for being here once again. Be sure to subscribe, follow along, video form, audio form. If you're an everyday, I really appreciate you tuning in each and every day here to Locked On Ravens. If you're this is the first time in, welcome into the channel. Hopefully you're enjoying the content. And if you're somewhere in the middle, thank you for rejoining the channel here for this episode. The Ravens, there are some things that maybe they could have done differently, right? We'll kind of run through this a little bit, but to me, I think a trade up was a really intriguing possibility for some of the guys who were still on the board. Terrion Arnold at 24. Again, I love the Nate Wiggins pick, but I think Terrion Arnold was a guy projected top 15. That was trade up territory for me. Detroit ends up trading up and getting him with Dallas. So I liked that. But the trade up potential for some of the players that the Ravens could have gotten. You're talking about the second round. Patrick Paul goes to Miami. I think a couple picks before the Ravens take Roger Rosengarten. Javon Baker goes to the Patriots. A couple picks before they get Tez Walker. Again, the Ravens made good picks based off who was on the board, but this is actually surprising. It was pretty much the second straight year that there were no trades from Eric DeCosta. Now, last year, obviously, they traded back into the draft to get Andrew Voorhees, but I'm only like half counting that. It wasn't like a huge trade up or a trade back. So not a lot of draft movement on that board for Eric DeCosta and the Ravens, which is pretty rare, right? Pretty rare for the Ravens organization. So I think I would have considered moving up and down the draft board a little bit, but Baltimore felt confident in their board, it feels like. And to them, it also feels like, based off their comments, they had a lot of their guys fall to them that they wanted. They really wanted Nate Wiggins. They really wanted Roger Rosengarten. They really wanted Tez Walker. Felt like the Ravens had their board fall to them the way that they wanted. Again, I also probably would not have taken a backup quarterback once Joe Milton went off the board. Probably would have tried to trade some of those 200s picks to package them and move up a little bit. Who knows how far you would have actually been able to go with those picks, but I probably would have tried it. And then, like Javion Cohen was there. Christian Mahogany was there forever with the medical, I assume, with the torn ACL. So there were bits and pieces here and there. I'm like, maybe I would have done this. Maybe I would have done that. But the top five, I still thought, based off who Baltimore picked and who was available, was really good. Again, kind of dropped off a little bit as the draft kept going on, but I'm weighing the earlier picks a lot more than I am the later picks. So let's get into now an AFC North draft update. Let's just quickly go around the division. We'll get more into this throughout the week and as we continue covering the draft and breaking it down. But an AFC North draft update. We'll start with Cincinnati, who took Amarius Mims. Mims is probably not going to start for them year one. They signed Trent Brown. They have Orlando Brown Jr. also. Cincinnati's trying to win. I don't know the deal with T. Higgins. I don't think he's going to be there next offseason. Mims has one of the highest ceilings in this entire draft. He's that good of a player. But for Cincinnati, I would have thought a guy that like a Troy Fautanu, who they could kick inside potentially and have him in a role year one. I don't know. I don't like the idea of, if you're competing, getting no production out of your first round pick. It probably will pay off for them in the long run. But to me, I don't know. I feel like I would have taken a more, not NFL, because Mims also has some growing to do in terms of his game, but I would have probably taken a more NFL ready tackle if I'm Cincinnati that probably could play guard. That's what I would have done there. So I still like the pick for him. Don't get me wrong. I was a big Mims fan, would have loved him in Baltimore, but I don't know. I feel like I would have taken a different player there, but the pick still is a good one for the player, but he's not going to play. So that doesn't help Cincinnati if he's not on the field playing. They also got Jermaine Burton, who has a bunch of off-field issues. But obviously, if you put that aside, he is one heck of a receiver. They also added a couple of tight ends. They haven't had a real tight end there since Tyler Eifert. It's been a really long time. Added a couple of defensive linemen. Chris Jenkins was a good pick. He moved to Pittsburgh. Offensive line revamp, the name of the game here. Troy Fautanu ends up going to Pittsburgh at number 20. They take Zach Frazier, the center from West Virginia, in the second round. Mason McCormick goes a little later to them. They also got Roman Wilson. They got Peyton Wilson. I hate to say it, but Pittsburgh did have a really good draft, in my opinion. And then Cleveland, not a lot of picks. Mike Hall, the Ohio State guy, goes to Cleveland. Other than that, though, they didn't really. I think Jamari Thrash went to Cleveland as well, so that was a fine pick. But obviously, they're still dealing with the Deshaun Watson trade, which actually was completed yesterday. So all of that is now over. Both teams for Cleveland, they get their picks back. There's no more giving anything over to Houston. So I think out of all the Ravens rivals, the Steelers had the best draft, followed by Cincinnati, followed by Cleveland. But I think Pittsburgh and Baltimore right up there side by side in terms of how well they did, which I think has been pretty consistent over the course of the North's franchise history in terms of Pittsburgh and Baltimore being up there. That's all I have for you here today, though, on Locked On Ravens. Thank you so much for tuning in. Of course, we'll be right back here tomorrow on Locked On Ravens, breaking down more of the 2024 NFL Draft for Baltimore, talking about some winners and losers. Stay tuned for that. See you right back here tomorrow on Locked On Ravens.